So we've seen a lot of Tea Party primary candidates popping up everywhere, and this week we got another one. In Kansas, we've got Milton Wolf. He's running against Senator Pat Roberts, and he announced his campaign this week in front of adoring throngs, I guess we can say, and our cameras were there.
I'm here today to take my stand for America. I'm here today to fight for our Constitution. I'm here today to fight for that divinely inspired American idea of individual liberty, limited government, and free market values. My friends, my fellow Kansans, my fellow Americans, my fellow patriots, I'm here tonight to declare my candidacy in the Republican primary for the United States Senate. Now, most of you know that Barack Obama and I are cousins. And as I like to say, you cannot choose your family, but you can choose to rise up and stop your family from destroying America. You probably remember that the president said of all of us here in the heartland that we're all just a bunch of bitter clingers, that we bitterly cling to our God and our guns and our supposed hatred towards others. Now, I just want you to know that not everyone in the family thinks that. As for me, I love the Lord our God. My firearm of choice is the Ruger SR-556, and I have hatred towards no man, only towards bad government that destroys our freedom. You know, Obamacare is by far the most destructive law enacted in our lifetime. And I wish I could just blame it all on the Democrats, but the truth is the road to Obamacare was paved by career politicians and paved by establishment Republicans. And I'm not just talking about Romneycare in Massachusetts. Look, when Republicans had control, we expanded Medicare, we expanded government health care, we expanded the reach of government right into your examination room. And you see, I oppose government-run health care, not simply because it costs too many dollars. It does, but that's not why I oppose it. I oppose it because it's immoral. When Washington wants to increase the debt, they know they can count on Pat Roberts. He's voted for the debt ceiling increase 11 times. When he went to Washington, our debt was around $1 trillion. It's now $17 trillion. That number is so big, it boggles the mind. And let me be very clear about this. When a government spends trillions of dollars yet to be earned by a generation yet to be born, that's not just a spending problem, that's a moral problem.
He's a physician. He's a blogger at miltonwolf.com. He's a columnist for the Washington Times, and just to make it more fun, he's even a distant cousin of Barack Obama. Now he's running for Senate in the Kansas Republican primary. Welcome, Milt.
Hello, Glenn. Greetings from Kansas. How are you today?
Great, and nice to hear from you. So why are you running for Senate in Kansas when there's already a Republican incumbent? Senator Pat Roberts has been in Washington since 1981, I think.
You know, Glenn, I'm a doctor. I'm not a politician, and I wish I didn't have to do this. But when you look around our country, you can tell that we're in a lot of trouble, and somebody's got to do something. Now, I've been a Republican all my life, but not always a proud Republican, because the truth is, our party let the country down. At one point, our party had complete control of the government in Washington. We had the White House, the Senate, even the Supreme Court. And you look at that era and what we did. We created the No Bureaucrat Left Behind for our schools, the largest expansion of the government Medicare program in the history. We grew the government bigger than any time in American history until this guy Barack Obama came along. You know, these establishment Republicans, they tell us that if we just elect more people with R's behind their name, that we'll solve everything. But we know that's not true. We know that government grows larger and larger with some Republicans, and we need to replace them with liberty-minded Republicans.
Well, you know, I actually noticed you're already having an effect, because I've noticed that since rumors of your running started to appear, Roberts has already started to take a more vocal, sort of Tea Party-leaning stance. Do you think that's real or just for show?
Well, I'll tell you something. After years of practicing medicine, Glenn, I've learned that I am not clairvoyant enough to know what's in anybody's heart, and all I can do is look at their actions. But Senator Roberts' actions speak very loudly. He's been in the Congress for decades now. And the 11th hour election year conversion is nice. But, you know, I've been around and spoken to Tea Party groups and liberty-minded groups around the state of Kansas and even around the country. And I don't remember one time seeing him there. You know, you look at somebody like Senator Ted Cruz, who just inspires me and inspires millions of Americans, millions of liberty-minded Americans. And I was so proud of him to see him in that 21-hour filibuster. That gave me great hope. In days when I worry if Washington can really be fixed, and I see someone like Ted Cruz, who, it shows what one man, what one person standing on principle can do. In a 21-hour filibuster, and I was pleased to see that Senator Roberts contributed a couple minutes to that 21-hour filibuster. Now, of course, it begs the question, why did it take him decades in Washington, the threat of a primary challenge, and the coattails of a 6-month freshman senator to get him to act? But the bigger question is this. If Senator Roberts really opposed Obamacare, why did he endorse and vote for Kathleen Sebelius to be in charge of Obamacare?
Well, you know, that's right. It's interesting to hear you talk about Ted Cruz, because I've interviewed some other Tea Party primary candidates this year, and it seems like he seems to be sort of a lodestar for a lot of people. Well, besides the general small government focus, what are some specific policies that you support, changes?
You know, several years ago, actually, a few years ago, I wrote the book First Do No Harm. Now, that's the first part most people would recognize. That's part of our oath as physicians, part of our Hippocratic Oath. And I think that's a concept, frankly, that most politicians don't understand. But in this book, I not only exposed Obamacare, but I laid out alternatives, free market alternatives in medicine. Now, these are things that can save our healthcare system. And our healthcare system is the finest healthcare delivery system in the world. We have the best doctors and we have the best nurses, but our government has been interfering. And since, you know, you can look back from the 1940s when we started coupling our health insurance with our employment, and then, of course, in the 1960s with Medicare, and you can go back even further to see when the government was picking winners and losers. But there are solutions to these. There are free market solutions that not only bring costs of medicine down, but it takes the moral path, and it puts the patient first instead of the politician. And that's the problem with all of these government-run systems. And the bottom line is this: we oppose government-run healthcare, not because it costs too much. It does cost too much. But we oppose it because it is immoral. It is immoral for government to get in between you and your doctor. And in fact, I would say it's even immoral for the government to know that you have a relationship with your doctor. And it is immoral for a government to decide who shall live and who shall die. But those were the words of Kathleen Sebelius. That's what our government is doing. So tax fairness. Tax fairness would allow individuals to buy their own policies and whatever policy they choose without the government deciding for them. We should have reciprocity among states so that you end this monopoly of insurance and also medical licensing. Let's not leave the doctors out of this. Let's make the doctors compete against each other in this free market reform. Let's use a health savings account. You know, Dr. Ben Carson famously said everybody who's born should be given a birth certificate and a health savings account. Now, I'll one-up him and say every baby who's born should be given a birth certificate, a health savings account, and a spanking on the bottom to remind them to behave. This is part of the solution. This puts patients in charge of their healthcare destiny rather than the politicians.
What do you think Republicans need to do to recapture the Senate and the White House?
You know, I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in the Reagan era, and I learned what it was to become an American from Ronald Reagan, and he had an answer to this. He said, you know, there are a number of Republicans who claim they want to have that big tent, and so they start waving pastel color flags, that they start acting like the other party, and so we can just try to bring more people into our tent. And Reagan said, no, the answer is to wave the bold color conservative flag. Let's stand for something. The establishment Republicans who say we want to build this big tent have no idea how to attract people into it. And you know how you attract people into our tent? You stand on the principle, the simple principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You unapologetically defend the Constitution, and you put your faith in American people, and that means individual liberty. And if you do those things, you will attract more people into our tent than we ever have before.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I just recently saw a piece in the National Journal, I think it was, that said that when you poll Americans on issues, they're actually more conservative and more in favor of small government than they've been in decades, but they're not voting Republican as a result of that. So How do you bridge that gap?
One of the weaknesses I have seen in the Republican Party in trying to communicate the idea of limited government is, no one cares about it. I learned this long ago, practicing medicine too. A patient doesn't care what you know until they know you care. And Republicans aren't always good at explaining that, and we confuse the idea of caring with giving things away. Now, that's not necessarily caring. We need to be able to speak about these policies, not just about the numbers of the policies, but about the morality of the policies. And I talk about the morality of healthcare and why it's important that we don't allow a bureaucrat to decide who lives and dies. But this is also true with our tax system, with our spending. We have 17 trillion reasons why we need to replace this entire Congress. And when we go $17 trillion in debt, and when we spend trillions of dollars that are yet to be earned by a generation yet to come of age or even be born, that's not a spending problem. It's a moral problem. And that moral problem is that we are so selfish, we care only about ourselves, and we're leaving our kids, we're leaving our grandchildren out to dry. Now that I would say is a moral message that we need to have more comfort in being able to explain that and explain why if you really care about people, then you won't go this big government route that ends up putting them in a subservient role to the government. As the government grows larger, individual liberty, people grow smaller. Now you would only do that if you don't believe in people. But if you believe in people, you would want them to have the freedom to live the life they want to live.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us about all this. We're going to follow your campaign with interest, as I suspect will Senator Pat Roberts. Where can people go to find out more?
Well, come by my website, miltonwolf.com. And in fact, we are launching a money bomb right after the big launch. And it's truly humbling and heartening to see so many patriots out there across Kansas and across America who are already pouring in. And we simply appreciate them and hope to, and we strive to be worthy of the trust that they place in us.
Well, we'll keep track of you, and thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, Glenn.
And thanks to all of you for taking the time to watch us. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.